In a distant corner of Japan, among the high mountains and the sonorous rustle of bamboo groves, there stood a monastery known only to a select few. Its walls were covered with moss, and the courtyard was decorated with a carefully manicured garden, where a large statue of Buddha was placed in the center. An old monk named Genshi lived in this monastery. He was known for his deep understanding of the nature of life and his teachings on achieving spiritual happiness. Genshi did not often communicate with people. He spent most of his time in silent meditation, contemplating the changes of the seasons and enjoying the silence that enveloped the monastery. But one day, a young disciple named Hitoshi came to him. The young man, tired of life's suffering and the bustle of the world, was looking for answers. He had heard that Genshi could help him find the true path to happiness. Hitoshi bowed before the old monk and asked him, "Teacher, what is true happiness? I see people around me striving for wealth and power, but their hearts are full of sadness. How can I find peace in my soul?" Genshi looked at Hitoshi silently and stood up without saying a word. He gestured for the boy to follow him. They left the monastery, and the monk began a silent journey through a narrow path to the top of the mountain. There was silence between them, broken only occasionally by birdsong or the rustling of the wind in the bamboo groves. After several hours of walking, they reached the top. From there, they could see endless fields, valleys, and distant seas. Genshi finally spoke. "Look, Hitoshi, what do you see in front of you?" "I see mountains, valleys, rivers, and the sea," the boy replied. "That's just the surface," said Genshi. "And that's how we see the surface of our lives. We perceive success as material wealth or social status. But as the Buddha said, everything that has the nature to arise has the nature to disappear. These mountains were here before us and will be here after us. Your happiness cannot depend on things that are transient." Hitoshi thought about it but did not fully understand Genshi's teaching. They sat on top of the mountain for some time, contemplating the beauty around them. Then the monk stood up and led his disciple back to the monastery. When they got back, Genshi pointed to an old teapot that was on the fire outside their cell. "Look at this teapot, Hitoshi," he said. "It is simple and nondescript, but it fulfills its purpose. Is there anything imperfect about it?" Hitoshi looked at the kettle carefully. It was old, with a few cracks, but it still kept warm and worked properly. "It's imperfect, but it's still useful," the boy replied. "That's right," Genshi said, smiling. "That kettle is you. We are all imperfect, but that doesn't make us any less valuable. Wabi-sabi is the acceptance of imperfection, fluidity, and incompleteness. Happiness is not about achieving perfection, but about accepting your path as it is. Even cracks have their own beauty." Hitoshi thought about it. Throughout his life, he had tried to avoid mistakes by striving to be perfect, but now he realized that this was a false goal. Genshi continued. Hitoshi remained silent for a long time, pondering his teacher's words. But he was still torn by doubts inside. It seemed to him that he had come to the monastery for clear answers, but instead he received riddles. He remembered how his friends in the city, one by one, found success. They got prestigious jobs, accumulated money, and climbed the social ladder. And although they still felt a certain emptiness, Hitoshi couldn't help but think that their path was clearer and more concrete than what Genshi was talking about. "Master," he finally said, "I don't understand. You tell me about imperfection and acceptance, but how does that help me achieve happiness? I see people who are fighting for success, who work hard, not sitting and accepting their fate. I came here to learn how to achieve more, not to accept what I already have. Isn't the power of man in striving for the best?" Genshi looked at the student calmly. His eyes showed a deep understanding, but he did not answer immediately. Waves of silence filled the room, with only the sound of the crackling fire in the kettle disturbing the peace. Finally, the monk spoke slowly. You still don't understand, Hitoshi. You are looking for happiness where you will not find it. As Confucius said, happiness comes to the one who finds peace in his heart. But you want to look for it outside, in achievements and external successes. These words irritated Hitoshi. He got to his feet, his voice sharp. How can you achieve happiness by simply accepting your imperfections? Isn't that just a way to avoid struggle? I don't want to live like this teapot, old, cracked, broken. I want more. I want to achieve. How can I be happy if I just give up? Genshi looked at him more sternly, but still calmly. He felt that it was time for a more serious conversation, although he knew that the words might not immediately resonate with his student. You speak of struggle, but it is not the struggle you should be fighting, the monk replied, his voice quiet but firm. You are fighting your own ego, not the real challenges of life. You want more for yourself, but this more is only a shadow that you chase for the sake of pride. You're afraid of failure, so you don't accept what you already have. As Zen Master said, he who has nothing has everything. Are you ready to realize this? Hitoshi, angry and puzzled, turned away abruptly. He felt betrayed by his own expectations. He had been looking for power and teachings that could help him become a better man, but instead he was receiving lessons about humility and inner peace. His voice trembled. But how will this help me in life? How can I achieve happiness when everyone around me is striving for achievement, wealth, and fame? You tell me to sit and accept imperfection when the world is forcing me to move forward. Genshi silently watched his student's emotional outburst. He could see that Hitoshi's anger came from a deep misunderstanding, and Genshi watched his student's emotional outburst in silence. He could see that Hitoshi's anger came from a deep misunderstanding, not disrespect. After a pause, the monk, without changing the calmness of his voice, said, "You cannot find happiness by looking for it outside. You are looking for a path that leads to a dead end. Think about the people you consider successful. Are they really happy? Do they feel inner peace, or is their life full of anxiety and fear of losing everything they've gained?" Hitoshi had his doubts. He saw in his friends the echo of the truth in his mentor's words. Even those who were successful were always striving for more, never satisfied with what they had. They were always anxious, always afraid of losing what they had gained. However, his pride did not allow him to fully accept these words. "But how do I know you're right?" Hitoshi asked, his voice tinged with despair. "Maybe I want to live a different way, to fight, to strive for more. Isn't that true strength?" "Your strength is not in fighting for the external," Genshi replied, gently but confidently. "Your true strength is in understanding yourself. As Miyamoto Musashi said, if you know yourself and your enemy, you will not lose 100 battles. You are already at war, but your real enemy is your dissatisfied heart. You have to win within yourself." Hitoshi fell silent. His emotions began to subside like waves. It was hard for him to accept that all the fighting he had been doing was directed at the outside, but the real battle was in his heart. Genshi came closer to Hitoshi and spoke. "Happiness is not the pursuit of external things, but the acceptance of inner peace. You can have all the things you want in the world, but without peace in your soul, they are only shadows. Your true power lies in finding harmony within yourself and learning to see the beauty in every moment of your life."